that option. Oh, all right. So here we are. First meeting of Liberty Sword Club Book Club. Liberty Sword Book Club? Liberty Book Club Sword? I don't know. The book club associated with Liberty Sword Club.
Liberty Book Club Sword.
Liberty Club Sword Book. Liberty Bibbity.
Book Liberty Club Sword.
All the above.
Liberty Brary. All right, it's talking about Fear is the Mind Killer by Kaja Sadowski. Going to book on effectively building a healthy training environment and one that people can like really thrive and grow in. The last time I read this book was when it came out, and I did not have a whole lot of time to go through the first chapter. So Cody has a whole page of notes. So I'm going to let Cody start this discussion.
I mean, I'm really just kind of expecting us to discuss what we think. Fear. The first chapter is what fear. What is it? What is it actually called? Failure, the keystone of learning. So like, it talks about the fear of failure, and also it goes into details about what failure. That failure is actually more beneficial than people often think. That you really you learn a lot from failure, more than like just repeating the same movements and do like that, like doing yeah. So I just kind of wanted to have a general discussion. I think this got fancier than I thought it was going to. I was just kind of like going like, hey, 2 or 3 people talk about it, be like, what is this? And whatever. Yeah. And then like now there's like 8 people in this chat. And cool. So
yeah. Unfortunately, you have somebody who works in the entertainment industry organizing this.
So I guess I just kind of wanted to talk about maybe if people are comfortable, like just discussing some experiences people have had with training and where failures have gotten in your way, and where how like positive experiences that you've had with that, people overcoming failure, or like for me, I was thinking of a time where toxic or just not a good training environment led to injury or something like that. So
I mean,
I've got lots of.
We don't have to talk about it either. It's just that's just kind of like where my mind goes whenever something like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the crux of this portion of the chapter, I think, is and something that, like in teaching, I made a really good point of like trying to squash as early as possible is just kind of hypercorrection. And the idea of get this technique perfect, make little adjustments to somebody doing the technique, and it becomes sometimes it almost kind of seems to become more a matter of showing how. Yeah, I don't know. It felt like when I was being kind of hypercorrective, it was less about the student themselves and more about me.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess starting with that was more of a thought whenever I knew it was just like 2 people that I knew better. So I forget that thought. That's not a really good start.
I mean,
plus we're recording now, so.
But I mean, I have a thought on this. If people want to entertain a story.
Yeah. What do you got?
Yeah.
So like for me, when I was in sword class, and like a lot of what I've been realizing with the KDF stuff is that a lot of the failures that, because we're in KDF at least, we're reconstructing a martial art that's doesn't have a linear line of teachers. So there's a lot of guessing at stuff. And a lot of the failures I made at early in sword class with a lot of people who were fencing taught me that the KDF that I think that we were doing wasn't correct. And it was a really good lesson because it was like, this is not working for me as a slightly shorter, slightly weaker person. And it should be working for me as a slightly shorter, weaker person. So then it led me to like do a lot of searching and figure out stuff that actually worked. A lot of it was stuff that Travis Mayotte brought to the table, but I've also adapted it to with some of the JSA concepts. But yeah, I've learned a lot from failure in that I think that when the thing doesn't work, it either doesn't work for you, which Becky has a lot of the time because of her height, or it doesn't work because you're interpreting it incorrectly. So I think failure is a really good teacher in that way, without going into crazy detail about little things that I've learned or figured out. Yeah, failure teaches you that the thing you're doing either doesn't work for you, or in the case of KDF, you're not doing it correctly, or in the case of a different martial art where maybe the teacher is kind of a bad teacher or doesn't understand the technique themselves, that the teacher doesn't understand the technique.
So there's two paragraphs that I highlighted where she talks about where she kind of touches on what you're talking about there. There's from the first page, the idea that failure is the domain of the rank beginner and a flaw to be overcome as quickly as possible is baked right into our understanding of how to train. If you look at any martial domain, you'll see where it can become twisted by a fear of failure. You can't get things right until you fuck them up a sufficient number of times.
Yeah.
And where was the other one? Crap. All right, I lost. Did I just not? I just didn't. Okay, I thought I highlighted it, but I didn't. Crap. What? Oh man, what was the? What I was going to touch on? Shit. I completely lost that train of thought. Somebody pick this up, please.
So I haven't even read the book yet, but I'm just gonna throw some of my thoughts out there and see what you guys think, right? So in general, fear for us is we fear for ourselves or we fear for other people, right? So it's afraid of doing something. Me personally, ever since I was a little child, I think I told this story to Dan, Cody for sure, and it was always I couldn't do any sport where I could even accidentally hurt anyone. The only thing I did was running, high jump and long jump, right? So alone on a track, I would not even have to interact with anyone. If I was good, I was good, right? So that in a way, that's fear, right? That I was afraid of hurting someone else. And now that I joined the sword classes, and it actually yeah, if I do the drills, I'm doing it. But as soon as Dan asks me to, okay, spar, I'm oh my God, right? And I'm not even that afraid of getting hurt. Sure, I can take a couple of bruises, whatever. But I'm I don't even want to hurt anyone, right? But so that is no, that's gonna be fine. I remember when you would ask me to actually just hit your hand with the pad on, and I would be oh my God, no, and you're no, go harder, you can do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that comes up in discussion a lot in some of the women's groups. It's been is that for women, a lot, not every woman obviously, but for some women, the ability to actually hate your sparring partner is inhibited because we're often socialized to try and avoid violence at every possibility, and it can take a lot more for some women to sort of compensate for that, to overcome that inhibition.
Yeah, and I forget where. Somewhere. Yeah, and she actually talks about this quite a bit, and I think one of the later chapters. I don't believe she gets into it in chapter 1. Right. And yeah. But yeah, that fear of, oh yeah, go ahead, Sasha.
No, I just had a experience about this, and I'm when I started fencing in like the days of black and white, like color hadn't been invented yet.
Black and white or black and red?
I never mind. We're done. No, it was I got very, very turned off by fighting and like free fencing. Like I would drill to like my heart's content, and but then as soon as I tried sparring, I just like everything would fall apart. And it, like the section on like motor programs and just sort of overcoming through like failure really kind of resonated. I have quite a lot of notes. But I remember one of the things that was helpful for me in just sort of learning how to hit things was actually doing like a Pell and just using that to get sort of feedback on like, all right, well, that cut was kind of shit. This cut wasn't. This cut was, and just sort of using an inanimate object that was not going to get hurt to sort of be able to calibrate the hits until I was getting a result that I was comfortable with and felt that like I would have enough control to exercise that same level of force against somebody who I didn't want to hurt, because I know like it gave me the ability to like dial it in. And if I didn't have a sort of safe way to go way too hard on accident and then way too light and like calibrate it like that, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am able to spar and control force level. But I got there through fucking up and turning a Pell into an hourglass over the course of a year and a half.
I definitely agree with the Pell thing. Like just getting a sense of how hard you're hitting. Like just getting a sense of how much force it actually requires before actually going and like taking it and striking somebody, you know, or like just, and also just feeling like the level of flex of those blades and like seeing what like how much power there actually is behind some of those stabs whenever you really stab. Like there's a lot of power there.
Yeah, I knocked over Dan's Pell yesterday. Like twice.
Yeah, I mean, there's like it's a lot. There's a lot there.
I had always assumed that because before I started team, I'd never actually done anything physical, so I'd always assumed that I was pretty weak, and whatever I'm hitting someone with is not going to be that strong. And the first time that I actually left a bruise, and it was probably the only time now that I think about it, but the fact that I left a bruise on Tim Kaufman, I was like, wait, what? And that was sort of, I guess, a wake-up call that, hey, no, anyone can hit hard. Then you need to calibrate, you know, what you're doing. And the Pell is the best way to do, except I did not have a Pell at the time.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like there's a learning curve, as like in the book, the better you get, the harder you hit. And I had this weird turning point where I finally sort of got my mechanics really good. And now my mechanics are even better. But there was a turning point where I got my mechanics really good. My shoulders were set back. My hips were set forward in a position that didn't feel like it hit really hard. But apparently when you do it just right, you can hit really hard with like proper posture. It's how like Tim Kaufman accidentally caved somebody's mask in from thrusting them in the face from like 3 inches away from their face. And yeah. Go
I
ahead.
had a front row seat. I don't know if Dan was there that year. It was 2018. I had a front row seat to Sigmund at Sword Squatch did a technically perfect thrust, and it did some damage.
Oh, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
that.
I don't want to get
Very-
into like
Yeah.
details.
I mean, they were
because I
alive,
forgot.
right?
Yeah,
They were alive. Yeah. Yeah.
So
but it's
I kind of think the point I was trying to make wasn't necessarily one on force. It was that what the book talks about when it comes to like the different types of training. I didn't write that down, but how that if you get part of what you're getting from fighting and making mistakes is the feedback that I got from that, and you can only get that from really going at something in a way that you can fuck up. And the like Pell wasn't necessarily like, I wasn't trying to make a point about like, yeah, I can hit really hard or anything. It was that
yeah.
I got to learn how to calibrate it and use the right motor program through Pell, because it gave me the option to like mess up, and you could and go too hard or go too light, and then learn how to like calibrate that. And that was the example that like stood out, because that was like a really huge problem I had when I started fighting, was that I was not willing to spar because I didn't want to calibrate that on like a person. So what I got a lot of about that, oh my God, my brain keeps turning off. What I got a lot of from the chapters was that the mistakes that you make should be made in a way, like if you're going to make a mistake, make it in training, don't make it in like a sparring fight, like a sparring match or a competitive match, or like a real fight. But maybe I just chose a bad example.
Yeah.
No, you did.
Well,
That was great. I was great. I actually was just trying to add to it by saying that even when you figure that out as a beginner, it's a life lesson. So I was trying to add to that. Like, I definitely have had to recalibrate myself multiple occasions, and unfortunately, I have figured some of those out on people, and I would have rather have not done that. Is I guess what I'm trying to say. So I heard you, and I think that you translated that very well.
Yeah. So actually, and talking about this is probably a good time to go into the motor programs section of this chapter, and the idea of kind of like what is a motor program. It's like, and so, the example that she gives is throw a jab, and of course, and we all know what a jab is, and we can practice that in a vacuum, like hammering out the same technique over and over and over again, and that's great, and it has loads of uses. But that's also not the entire motor program. There's force calibration, as we were just talking about. There's distance. There's 1,000 other little considerations that go into that have to do with things that your body is doing, that your body needs to do, and things that your opponent's body is doing, and it all kind of coalesces together into just throw a jab.
Sorry.
Trying to manage every last little step of that is just not possible, and so kind of compartmentalizing bits of your training and then bits of your technique and your fight into like little packets of information that you can just kind of unwrap this little program and say go is helpful. And one of the ways that we figure out how to do this is by fucking things up in training, and honestly, as far as my outlooks go, sparring as well. Sparring is the best place to fuck up. in my opinion.
I mean, I think that what one section that stood out to me because I thought it was just really interesting that kind of goes along with the you know, it's one move, but it's a lot of things. You know, every move has so many things, and she talks about a Hicks law. Where its response time equals, well, I put it into a formula because I thought of it that way, but response time equals the number of stimuli, like the simultaneous stimuli that you get, plus the simultaneous responses that you can give to that. And whenever you have, even in just one move, there's so many responses with that one move. And the more you practice something and the more you fail at something, the more you see, you see like through your failure, the more like the better you can, the more you can process what you see. Like the thing I thought of was you know, whenever the first time you go down like a path when you're hiking, right, it seems like it's forever, like that, like 2 miles seems like way longer than 2 miles down a path you've been down before. So whenever you go down the same path, whenever you see the same stimuli, whenever you see the same thing repeatedly, and if you're able to respond to it, and so through your failures, you can also respond faster to those things because you're seeing things you're not seeing in a perfect situation.
I mean, I think there's also a pertinent information problem with that, where you're taking in almost all fencing, in my experience, has been done with partial information. You don't have all the information. You have to figure out what partial information is important and what partial information isn't important. And I think that that's also where failing can help. I remember, when I first started fencing, that was my problem, is I tried to get all the information. And by the time I had all the information, it was too late to take an action.
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn what you need to filter out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big one. Like, I remember Tim Kaufman was like, I do his work how if I make a cut and my point is not online. If my point is in a certain quadrant of the fencer's positioning, that's when he does the action. That's all the information he filtered it to. He filtered it to a very small amount of information. And apparently that worked for him. But yeah, I think the filtering is really important in that. It's not just the other, yeah, my brain is going off. Yeah, that.
Yeah. Kind of condensing things into as small a space as you can, and just having those little packets of information ready to go.
Well, I think what I was saying is, like, whenever you see, like, the more you see something, the more you're going to see, but the less it's gonna like condense down into simpler concepts. Like that whole like whenever my points to the certain quadrant do is vera, that is like the most condensed form of eliminating all the less necessary and focusing on all this. And so just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not incredibly complex, because I think our brains work in a way where we make all these connections that we stop having to think about the more we have the same experience or have similar experiences or more things we experience. And that whenever you have all those experiences, they condense down into simpler things that allow us to react faster if we choose to try to think of it that way.
Yeah, I agree completely.
To get to the point of the book, though, sorry, I think the relationship of the first chapter to the introduction and the point of the book is that certain populations, and it's not even a population specific thing, although it in many ways can be and is that fencing and martial arts exist in an environment where you don't have all the information and things are constantly changing. As you were saying, there are all these decisions that you have to make really quickly, and it's always changing. And yet, when you're trying to learn how to do these skills and learn how to do these things, the cost for failure is so high that however you define failure, and you've all explained your relationship with what was failure, what you didn't want to fail at, and it was different for each one of you. But how do we make that fear of failure something that is not going to prevent you from actually being able to learn the skills that you're trying to acquire? So in this first chapter, so that's like basically the point of the intro. But in the first chapter, what she talks about is this dichotomy between learning by rote. Here, we're going to drill. This is the drill. And you're going to do this one thing, and you're going to do it repetitively in this extraordinarily controlled environment, as opposed to an open environment where you're going to constantly vary. You're going to work on the skill, but the skill's going to have some different aspects to it. And you're going to work on this small nugget of a skill and in different applications. And those applications are going to be changing as well. So you're essentially going to have to figure out, how do I make this work for me in all of these different contexts, which kind of gets to some of what you were both talking about with Tim, is that he's figured out how to make it work. He's figured out what he needs to hold on to. And his lesson that he was trying to impart to us was, somewhat different. The other aspect that I think, oh, damn, I forgot what I was going to say. The other aspect to it is that it changes that, oh, right. So how does that relate to the point of the intro and the book, is that in that open situation, you're going to be failing constantly. You're going to hit somebody too hard. You're going to get hit. You're going to just sort of screw it up in a million different kinds of ways. You're going to be too short. You're going to be too slow. You're going to be whatever it is. You're going to fail to meet your own expectations of your performance, and you may fail externally in some other ways as well. There's going to be consequences. So how do we create an environment that makes it okay to screw up, so that that fear of, whatever it is that we're afraid of doing or afraid of encountering is not so overwhelming that we say, okay, I'm outies. And like she also says, doing things by rote, or doing things in that sort of closed chain, repetitive, controlled way, will create a student who, like the master, who brought his students with him, and he was perfect. He couldn't be beat as long as he was getting the exact feedback that he had trained for. So how do we create an environment that allows all of that to happen in a healthy way? That's my spiel. Bye, then. Thank you.
Right. That's what she's getting at here.
Yeah, that's a pretty succinct summary of like the intro on the chapter. So.
Yeah, so the like application of a technique, when we were just doing classes on Zoom, like we were absolutely just kind of spamming the movements, getting comfortable with that. but just for lack of a dynamic environment, we couldn't really train anything having to do with feedback. Contrast this against like the last time I was the last time that we were like really training Zornhow really heavy in the club. I had this I had this game that I called Wrath Derby, which is kind of vamping on a dagger game that I learned from Keith Stratton, in which one person is standing in the middle, and one at a time, somebody somewhere in that around that circle comes in with a dagger, and they do one thing. There's a short exchange, and then that person goes. Whatever the result of that is, that person goes back to the edge of the circle. Next person comes in, and that's the game. I forget whether you're in the middle for a period of time, or if there's rules about who gets out or whatever. But the game we played was one in which somebody is in the middle of this circle, and somebody's going to come in with an overhowl. That's one condition of the game. There's going to be an overhowl. You just don't quite know from which angle it's going to come from and who is going to give it. And your goal is to figure out where the overhowl's coming from, give it Zornhow, extend the point. Very often, you don't. Very often, the Zornhow and the overhowl don't do the thing that the book says they're supposed to do, until you start doing it for a while, and until you find that you've gotten either whacked in the head a bunch of times, or you've missed your thrust a whole bunch of times, and it starts working. And then we can go back into wait, why didn't that work? Okay, well let's try what do they suggest with this? All right, cool. Let's try that thing. And then we go back to it, and then we get hit a bunch more times. And overall, the whole thing ends up actually being a lot of fun, because it's just kind of a fun, silly game that's called Wrath Derby, for fuck's sake. How silly is that?
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's you're doing, this is the art part of it. It's not science. If it worked every time, it would be science. But it's art because the thing that you're doing doesn't work every time and against every variable. And it's funny, there was a thing about, I was reading an article about fencing that was talking about that, about how they say you're supposed to do something with your foot. I forgot if it's your toe first or your heel first, but they said never do this thing. And then they took slow motion video of advanced fencers, and they did the thing that they were told not to do. And almost all of them did it. Like, and that was what you learned to do after you did the thing the other way. But yeah, the slow-mo was like people adapted the thing in a way that they were told not to adapt it, but it worked.
Yeah, I mean, like,
so it's interesting, the small adaptations we made. Like, there's a wall where Rob, yeah. I was just gonna say, there's the video of Jim's wall where Rob does like Zornhow, basically. He does the Japanese version of Zornhow, or just whatever Zornhow. And he does it by stepping to the left and then stepping through. And I've never seen him teach that in class. He never taught that in class, and I've never seen a left in the video work flawlessly. We figure out that we need to do, and the way that we package information starts to kind of become like, is that what you were saying?
Sorry, a lot of that came through kind of garbled.
Yeah, I'm having some
basically
sound
what I'm
issues.
saying is we adapt certain techniques without. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
no.
okay. Well, in short, what I guess I'm trying to say is that we adapt things in weird ways without even realizing the little tricks and hacks that we're doing, and it can be hard to teach sometimes. Like, why did that technique work? Well, you did a weird thing with your foot, or you moved a certain way with your hip, or you like did a thing with your left hand, and it's hard to teach that because maybe it's idiosyncratic to you.
Right, and that's kind of what this some of this gets at, I think, with kind of hypercorrection and this, and then the idea of, okay, this is how the technique must be done. This is what it these are the exact things that you need to do this thing, and you must do it and never do this thing and always do that other thing. When it's really not so black and white, is it? When ultimately kind of learning as much as you learning everything that you can about sort of how your body behaves and how your body just kind of likes to do things is a really big part of this training that can get overlooked sometimes.
And also escalation of action is interesting. Like, I found that if I did the text exactly as it says it, it doesn't work. If they do this action, you do shield how and thrust them in the face. The only time I got whacked in the head today fencing was when I committed to a shield how. But when I threw a shield how and just used it to break the guard and then waited for my opponent to take the next action, that worked way better. So it's interesting. Sometimes you'll read something and you'll interpret it a certain way, and it won't actually be that thing. It'll be like very black and white sounding, but the way it seems to work better is a slow escalation of violence. Like, you escalate and then you see how they escalate and then you escalate, as opposed to escalation to full kill. I don't know.
Right. So I think some of what this gets at here is how do we learn that? How do we figure out how this works in the context of making mistakes?
So I think
Yes.
what you guys are saying is really interesting, and it's really specific to the consequences of what the chapter is sort of trying to get at. Because the real question, I think, that we're being asked is, how do we create an environment? What is it that we need to do as teachers, as as a club, as fighters, to create an environment in which it's okay to do this kind of open practice, so that we can develop what it is we need to, our own individual bodies, our own individual minds need to learn in order to make these things work. So that's the question, is what is it that we need to, how do we structure a lesson so that there are these moments where we can learn in ways that are not going to inhibit us, so that we're not afraid of the cost of failure, so that in that open chain, is it that we're making, for example, you were talking about Zornhau. Okay, so the Zornhau is coming. If I was to describe that example in the context of the first chapter, I would say, well, number one, you turned the lesson Zornhau into a game. Nobody was going to win, so you're going to get stabbed and myrtleized a whole bunch of times. And perhaps there was also an instruction, you know, you as the person coming at the person in the middle, your job isn't to go fast. Your job isn't to go hard. Your job is to just come in from a stream from a weird angle. That's all you need to do. The person in the middle is already going to be freaked out. So you're just coming in, you know, they don't know necessarily when you're coming. You might be behind them. So do not try to go hard. Do not try to go fast, because they're already under a ton of pressure and they're already being tested. So in that way, by setting out the rules and the goals very clearly from the beginning, the person in the middle knows, okay, I'm not going to get, you know, sideswiped by, you know, Goliath. All I need to do is really just catch their blade and try to hit them. I'm still going to get hit most of the time.
It almost feels like you want to consider building drills, and this is generally, not you specifically, but it almost feels like you'd want to consider building drills where failure is an actual part of the drill. Like, you have to be able to learn to fail to be able to deal with the failing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just thinking.
Exactly. So, you know, that's built into the whole system from the get-go.
One of the thoughts I had after reading everything was that both the introduction and chapter 1 kind of very much struck me as a learn by doing, but also learn from failing while trying to do, and that a good training environment can contain like very strict guided things, as long as that is heavily supplemented by a more random training environment, like the examples that other people have given, where there is a almost inevitability that failure and mistakes are going to happen, and you won't achieve the desired result, but you will achieve a result, and then eventually through that you will learn the right way of doing that and what kind of situations that is applicable in, because you're not learning it the same way every time, so you're kind of triangulating the correct situation to use a technique in through the using it at incorrect times, which like is how I learned not to get zverked in the hands, because we didn't fight with gloves in Arma, and you learn very quickly that also a couple of broken fingers later. Don't do that, but learn from failure, so with enough safety equipment in there so that it's not actually dangerous. I just want to say that. I'm not saying Arma has a good training method. Just
yes.
I think this gets into sort of more psychological aspects, and I know this is addressed further on in the book, but I just want to bring up that when you're looking at creating drills that allow for failure and to encourage people how to deal with failure, you have to also be in an environment where that failure is at the very least okay, if not expected, as opposed to an environment that expects you to be, you know, that once you're successful, you will always be successful, when the reality, as we all know, is far different. But you have to have that, I guess, psychological area where you're comfortable, and it's something she says directly in the book. I think she says it. She might say it a little later on, or she might say it in the introduction. But it's about you need a psychological safe space to train things that are physically dangerous, and you need a physically safe space to train things that are psychologically dangerous. So it's the making sure that while you're exploring these things in one area, that the other variables are set in a way that's going to make that exploration the most productive.
Yeah, no, that last bit 1,000%. You know, we're hitting each other with swords. So how do we make the place where we're hitting each other with swords actually this very safest place that we can possibly be, while doing the thing itself.
And I think that some part of me has evolved to think about principles in that case. So, like, when I first started, I did not like any level of rigidity in any training elements. But now, in one element, I'm realizing define one thing and correct it kind of way can be useful. Like posture for me. If your posture is good and you get your structure good, you can't make erroneous mistakes as easily. Like throwing your shoulders too far forward or doing a cut improperly is harder to do with bad posture versus doing a cut improperly is, if you have bad posture, you can learn things that work but are counterintuitive to the larger idea. So sometimes the biggest thing is to pick out the thing that will fuck.
Oh no, we
You
lost
cut
you.
out.
I think we lost you.
I mean, I think we lost him. I think what I was thinking. Oh, he's back. Right, there you go.
Overswing.
I'm having a very hard time hearing you, Ashanti.
Sorry, that was it for me. I was.
Oh, so I think what they were getting at with that was because kind of where does blocked practice fit into this?
I was saying.
Oh no. La, 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 la. All right.
So, okay, so to get to what Rebecca was saying, one of the things she points out, I think in the somewhere again in the intro, is that when you first come into a martial arts environment, one of the things, at least in some of the different styles that I've studied, is that they say, well, if you make one mistake, you're dead now. And that kind of, and especially as a very small person, I'm always aware that if I make one mistake, I'm done for. And even in practice, in training, I have made a miscalculation and gotten really injured more than once. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who's had this experience where it's like, okay, I just made a little tiny miscalculation and now there are some lasting consequences. And that's really a problem when you're trying to learn, because I don't want to make another mistake. I don't want to get, really, I'm just trying to learn. And that sense of, oh my God, if also the sense of being seen to, well, you made a mistake there. When you're learning this technique, if you had done this, you would have died. So like, thank you, I know that. So it's not just, it's not just the physical consequences. It's also sometimes in the process of learning, as Rebecca was saying, it's like, it's shame.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a really big thing in martial arts. It's like we do a lot of, inadvertently, there's a lot of shaming that comes along with the territory of learning techniques. And I think what you were saying about the game, it both makes it fun. It takes it takes some of the pressure of that shame of losing, that shame of oh, I just screwed up again.
Roll it.
If you build in that, like, not only are you going to fail, but you need to fail. The expectation that you need to fail. If you don't fail, if you're not failing a lot, you're not going to proceed. So I think the concept of what a win is, because everybody wants to win, everybody wants to succeed. So I think if we somehow recodify what we consider to be a win, a success, then that will also, and I'm not talking about participation awards, I'm talking about, something that's directly, although to be serious, a participation award for martial arts means you're there and you're practicing. So it's not nothing.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
but
I
I'm
joke
not
about
what?
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
But,
Making a progress remark.
I still didn't hear, but you'll tell me afterwards.
Yeah.
But like, the very real sense that, we need to redefine, as in the classroom, we need to redefine what, the win of the exercise is in order to make it safer and more conducive to this higher, deeper kind of learning experience that she's driving at with the dichotomy between open learning and open skills and closed skills. So, yeah.
But to get back to your point, and I know it's a little tangential, but when you're talking about participation, awards or medals or whatever, I mean, I joke about them all the time, but, and it's a very big but, that when you are talking about something like martial arts, when you're talking about something where people like myself with no athletic background, or people like yourself who are at a major disadvantage because of size, and you're up there and you're training with people who are, super talented, or they've been training martial arts for forever, or they go to tournaments and they win all the things or whatever. Participation is not nothing. Sometimes the biggest battle that anyone can fight is just going to class and doing the thing. And we shouldn't, negate it and or say like, oh, that's nothing, because we come from different backgrounds. We have different goals. Some people might have no interest in competing. Some people, competition is their big driver. Some people going to practice is like their normal everyday thing, and other people it's a big deal, whether it's a physical thing or an emotional thing. But getting to practice and getting on the floor and doing a drill. In my own experience, one of the things I had the hardest time doing was learning how to fall, because I am terrified of being upside down or inverted. And I had to actually seek out Jess Finley in private to give myself that safe space to learn how to fall and to overcome that fear that way. And so, depending on what skill you're teaching that day, you might have a student who their biggest victory isn't, doing a successful drill. Their biggest victory is just going to class and showing up in the first place. And we shouldn't discount that.
Yeah, I mean, that really matters. Because what you're also getting at is that we have an environment in which people are showing up for all different kinds of reasons, and there needs to be space to hold all of the different reasons why students are there.
Today, that was me. I could barely walk. I was like, oh, I can't make it. I was like, no, I'm going to go, right? And then after class, I was like, Cody, can you drop me home? Like, because I wasn't sure I could walk back home.
Well, I think that's I think that's one of the most interesting things about her opening and her talking about it is that, and she gets to it later in the book, which I think is very important, is recognizing why a person's there. Like you as the person who's there and either instructing, or you're like in my club, I've been there now, I don't know, 4 years, and people think I know something, which I don't, but I'm happy to teach what I do know. But recognizing why each person is there And like you said, whether it's the participation or teaching them to get better at the thing or whatever, I think she sort of broaches that is like recognizing the person coming to you, what they have, what they're bringing to the table, and what they want out of it. Because I'm an MKDF, and I know people refer to us as the hippie club, and it's probably true because we don't have a lot of, like super like hardcore structural like teaching and, oh my God, fitness program and all this other stuff. But even then we have people that struggle with the fitness because this is their thing. They're trying to get back into fitness, not trying to like win tournaments. I want to get here, have some fun, learn something. And I think one of the things we have to all learn as practitioners, and I really liked, because she pointed it out in every step of the way, almost in every chapter, is why is that person that's opposite you there? What are they trying to get? And the bigger part, and I don't remember whether it's in the first, I just recently read it, but I didn't reread the chapter, so I'm sorry. And I just saw you guys about a half hour ago. I'm like, oh, I hope they're not annoyed if I jump in. I like the fact that she just kept sitting there and saying, be a good partner. Whenever you partner drill, whenever you're working with somebody, be a good partner, because there are some people in my club I just choose not to partner with during drills because they don't understand what their job is as fencer A or fencer B, or if they're fencer B and responding to your impetus and then giving you something to respond back to, they then go 3 steps further and 5 times faster and just go, okay, you know what, when I'm trying to learn something. So I think the message that I think she really gets early on in the book is recognize what people are there and be a good partner, because you don't know where anybody else is coming from, and you have to listen to that person to be the best partner. I'll shut up now.
How do you, like, this is just more of an open question to like move the conversation in that particular direction, but how do you think that we can build that awareness of being a good partner, and also to have people becoming more aware of why another person might be there, and being able to step back from why they're there and why the other person's there, like, make that work?
I'll be completely clear. I think that it's on the leadership in your club, or the big, mean, ugly person like me, I'm 300 pounds, I'm a 5'9" guy, I bounced for a lot of years. I'll go up to a guy I think's being a bad partner and say, straighten up or step out of the drill. And I think sometimes you have to do that if you think they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And then it teaches two people, the person that's on the other side that's not getting fair treatment, and the person that's not doing it right. Notice.
I think one of the...
Tasha's being very patient with her hand. Sorry.
I think on the establishing a training culture, a lot of it is just from what I got reading it as like, all right, I'm going to, build a school and I'm going to start, teaching a class, is that I need to make the environment and the student comfortable by showing that, like, I'm not infallible. I make mistakes all of the time, but what separates a more experienced fencer from a beginner fencer is being able to like take those mistakes and being like, oh, that was really dumb, and then recover from that, because there's that breadth of knowledge that like, yeah, I made that mistake, but the last time I made that mistake, this is how I stopped myself from getting hit, and is to encourage other students to like make those same mistakes in a safe environment where they can then the next time something like that comes up, they can be like, all right, I did this, then the opponent did this, then I did that, and you develop the simple motor program that is throw a jab at a stationary target to you put more and more context on that until that motor program becomes something that's very versatile, and you don't need to think, like, you don't need to load like 3 or 4 sub programs to get the same result, because it's all been categorized and put into the throw a jab thing. And one way I like to do that is just kind of by either demoing the mistakes or talking about how, like, it's, if you make the mistake and just stop, take a minute, and then take a second and just sort of play over what happened in your head and see like where, like, take a moment and replay it, so that way you know what happened and what went wrong. so that way when you do the exercise again or the drill again or whatever the example is, you can self-correct and prevent that mistake. And once you train that ability to make a mistake and then self-correct from that, you can, like, the sky's the limit. You don't really need an instructor anymore. You just need stimulus. So you just can get together with somebody and fight. And I think that like nugget is the most important thing that's being like talked about.
I think that's like
And I think that,
a huge
Rebecca
lesson.
had something.
Oh,
yeah.
So Sasha
wait,
kind of went on a different path from where I was going to go, which is cool. Sorry, words are hard and
Can I
stuff.
just say something really
But-
quickly? Because I've been trying to say it for a little while. Can I just say something really quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm just, every time I try, it doesn't work and it's driving me crazy. This is where I think the shaming and the attempting a lot of martial arts where they try to get you to get everything perfect. You need, the trick is to boil down the thing that's necessary. Like the thing, and I think looking at it from an entertainment perspective, you can watch someone build something wrong, that's fine. If it takes them 6 more hours to build it, that's fine. If they're gonna hurt themselves or what they're doing is counterintuitive to the larger idea, then maybe you kind of do something or you'd say something about it. So that's kind of what I mean about the principles. Because just letting people mess up, just kind of putting them in a room and letting them mess up without giving them any corrections can be problematic because people will figure out hacks for bad things like crappy posture, or people will figure out hacks for things like bad footwork. And that's not what you want them to do. What you want them to do is start from a place that's good and then build on that. So like, you don't want, Japanese martial arts goes too far in the other direction, in my opinion. They kind of make you, they give you every principle that you have to master. Where a lot of times NIFA didn't give you footwork or posture. So you allowed yourself to overcorrect a lot of mistakes that you were just allowed to correct for. And I did that a lot. Like my cutting worked really well, but it was because I had like 6 hacks for bad posture, when it would have just been better if I didn't have bad posture and somebody said something about it or whatever, right? And I think that that's a big thing about keeping people safe is principles.
Yeah, I think we can. I just still want to get to Rebecca's thought, and we can get back to this because that is something that I think ties into what Eric was just saying. But I want to get to what Rebecca has been trying to say.
So, in terms of creating that safe space, one idea that has occurred to me, and this is if your club is large enough to do it, which not all clubs are, but if your club is large enough to do it, one of the things that you can consider is doing a sort of mentorship where the older, have been around long students are helping the newer students, but you take it to where your mentors are the people you trust, the people that are propagating the atmosphere that you want the club to have, and they take the time to get to know new students and say, why are you here? What are your goals here? What can we do to help you achieve these goals? Because as we were saying before, everyone has different goals, different reasons for being there. And I know that a number of clubs have done mentorship programs with varying degrees of success. But I think that if you do it right, if you really take the time to get to know the student that you're working with, then that it helps your new students feel more welcome, and it helps your mentors become better teachers.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting idea that I would think of it as sort of like a second layer to what Sasha was saying. I think what she was saying really sort of dives into the whole issue of failure, which and sort of is a good expression or a solution to the question that I was asking, how do we make failure a part of the, a desirable part of the learning process, by pointing to a method of building it into the lesson itself. So for example, and Sasha, I don't see you at the moment, but if you're still there, I would love to hear more of your thoughts around this. A way might be, I really like that you said, well, okay, after you screwed up this move, think about, why did it screw up? What happened? Where did it, what was it that went wrong? Why do you think it went wrong? And building that whole process into the learning, into the class or the exercise would be a really good way of changing how we approach the whole process of learning, turn it more into a laboratory, and change, all of a sudden the student starts to think, well, oh, so I'm supposed to be asking these questions. I didn't even think of that question. I didn't know that I was supposed to be looking for that thing over there. And it slows down the whole process. And I think it does make it more sort of fun in some ways, because now you're testing, now you're exploring. It changes the whole relationship. And as you said, now the student is learning how to teach themselves and how to do their own exploration. There's also learning how to teach other people as well. And having a mentor might be part of the way that we can do that process. But I don't know. I think that's, Sasha, what you said was the first time I really heard somebody, I've heard somebody say, well, why do you think it didn't work? And I was like, I don't know. And then they were like, well, I got to go now. I'm like, well, okay, well, that was not very helpful, because I don't even know the question. I'm so new. All I know is I got bopped on the head. I don't know why it didn't work. I still don't know why some things that I try don't work, and I don't know how to go figuring out how to make it work.
I come back to the idea, because I've seen it happen more than a couple times, that once a club gets to a certain degree of amount of students, and we all want clubs to grow and succeed, but eventually if your club has just one or two teachers, you get to a point where the club is too big for just one or two teachers to be able to effectively teach everyone. Yep. So you need to find a way that everyone can get what they need, and what everyone needs is going to be different. Some people, like you said, don't know what questions they should be asking. As an example, other people might know the questions they should be asking, but they don't know what the answer should be. And some people need to work on how to phrase the correct answer so that they can teach the next round of people.
Yeah.
So I think if we started building, building on what you said, building on what Sasha said, and then I'm done. If we started including that kind of a process at the very beginning, we're going to solve the problem of, well, okay, we've got one teacher who does all the work and all this pressure is on them. We're going to start raising our own mentors, and that will really enable the club to expand, because teachers will rise up as, or kind of organically. But I think, we're going to really need to figure out how to, if this is what we want, we're going to need to figure out how do we, how do we structure the failure exploration, call it the laboratory. I don't know. Let somebody else rename it.
I think laboratory is a great term to use for it. It's a laboratory of ideas.
Yeah, and I think this kind of brings us kind of all the way around to what Eric had been saying about you know, at the point at which it kind of comes down to leadership, also tying in with what Ashanti was saying about you know, not being overbearing, but still having the guidance present, and kind of allowing us to explore these things in a way that's safe for everybody, and it's also effective for everybody's training, and creating an environment in which we're all looking out for each other. If we might not always know the questions that we need to ask, but we may know, but we may be able to ask the same questions. I'm losing my train of thought here. Looking out for each other, and the leadership that is present has a role in facilitating that. And Eric, you I think you had your hand up before.
I think Sasha had something to say first, though. I thought she had her hand up before I did.
Oh, their hands, I can put up.
Sasha, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, just but real quick, if you don't have video, if you go to reactions, there's a thumbs up and a clap emoji. If you want to throw one of those up, if you have something to say, just so that way, those of us that
cool.
have video and other stuff, somebody can kind of be the moderator thing and just pass it around, so we don't like step on each other, because everybody has so much to say and everybody has a lot of wonderful thoughts, and I don't want anybody to feel cut off. But there's been a lot of like people just sort of jumping in, and so if you don't have a video, just throw up the little, if you mouse down to reactions, you can see a clap or a thumbs up, and then somebody who has a camera can sort of get in your corner. Oh wow, I had a train of thought that was kind of responding to Tybee and everything else. I brain off. Sorry.
All right. So I guess I was going to sit there and say, Tybee, I love the idea of organic leadership developing. I think the problem is, and this goes back to some of the root things throughout the whole entire book, which is that you got to know what people you're inviting, why you're inviting them, why they're there, and then you have to have the set of rules that you're going to have in the club. But then in addition to that, you kind of have to have your principles you're teaching, and I think that's one of the things when you're grooming new teachers, that a lot of clubs run into problems, and we have in my own club, which is that this person teaches this thing, the beginner class, and teaches this thing this way. And then people go on to the group of people we have teaching sort of intermediate students, and each of them teaches a crump slightly differently. Not that that's a bad thing, but if they're not all consistent in the message as to when you throw the crump, and exactly whether you throw it here or throw it there, and give the feedback and stuff, that I think is probably worse for your intermediate students than it is for anything else. So the club, I think it still goes back to leadership and the people in the club trying to decide how are we going to move people along, because, and I'm going to go circle back to what a couple other people said, how do we keep people participating and giving them the participation award, even if they're not becoming the best skilled fighter? Because like I'm 50 something, I'm past my prime. I'm never going to go win a lot of tournaments, no matter how guileless I am. It doesn't matter. I'm not fast enough to beat all you young 25-year-olds out there. But it doesn't mean I don't have value in the club and I don't have something to teach, and I may learn something along the way too that makes me better. But I guess back to it is you still got to sit there and go, okay, why are we teaching and what are we teaching? And that has to be on a more global level for your club than just each individual teacher, the bigger the club is, because we've gotten pretty big pretty fast and we're running into that problem, I think. I'll shut up now and listen.
Ashanti had their hand up, so go for it.
Yeah. So I think that that's an interesting problem. We had that problem in that Eric brought up. We had that problem in NIFA where we tried to universalize everything, and it didn't work well in certain ways also because it is important for students to see the different ways that things work for different people at different heights and such. And Jay is a big man who can use intimidation really well, and he designed the entire course. So he was like, no, we're only going to do it this way. This is the only way that we can do this technique. And it would work for him because he's like, I don't know, 6'4" and like used to be in the army. He could do almost anything and make it work. I've seen him throw someone out of a room. I've seen him throw Josh Please out of a room with his hand. So like part of the problem that can happen when you try to unify the curriculum is who's in charge of unifying the curriculum? Who's doing it? And like Peter Haas has been doing a lot of like 10 hat theory stuff, but for a long time Jay was like, no, you can't do 10 hat theory stuff. We have to unify the curriculum. So it's an interesting problem there too, is how do you have curriculum variations showing that this is a thing, at least with KDF, where we don't have a line of masters who have taught this. So there is no actual correct way to do this. There's what we think is the correct way to do this, but there isn't a correct way. So that's kind of the balancing element to what Eric said. Not that I think Eric is incorrect, because if I were in charge of a club, I would be really hard on posture just for physical safety, right? So I would do a little bit of what Eric's saying, but I would also be wary in how much limitation I put on the curriculum to be connected and locked in. That's what I have to say.
I'm going to just jump into say we have just a couple of minutes left. We're due until 7:30.
Okay.
So yes, Tybee.
Yes. So I wanted to hopefully possibly remind Sasha of what I wanted her to talk about, and maybe that would help remind her of whatever thought she had. So what I was talking about was the need to incorporate the process that she was talking about of how do you, when in that moment that you fail, so you do something, you screw it up, you fail, and what are the questions that you ask yourself? How does that whole thing work? Because she seemed to have a thought, you know, an idea of how to do it that was more or less systematic. I don't know, not going to speak for her, but I think all these other conversations about curriculum design are much higher level. I think we need to get down to a very, very base sort of idea, going back to the book, about how do we deal with our fear of failure? How do we approach that? So I'd really very much like to hear some of her thoughts around that.
So on that, and I will try to not be super long-winded about it, I had to figure out what questions I needed to ask at first, because it wasn't something that anyone particularly taught me. But a lot of what I would do if I did not understand what had just happened was ask my training partner, okay, can you react the same? I'm gonna feed you the same stimulus, and I need you to like react exactly the same so I can just see what happened and understand it. And then like, that's okay. Like, you can take a random training environment, and if you find a nugget in there that you didn't understand, you don't have the questions to like analyze it in your head, it's okay to ask and to turn that into something that was more blocked or variable. And when you have that question, it's okay and it's healthy to tackle it in that moment, because it's not really diverging from the exercise. You're learning out of that failure, even if as a curriculum you were supposed to be doing Zwerkow, but you accidentally kind of stumbled into some sort of Schielhau gray area where you did the slightly wrong stimulus and got a different result. And it's okay to explore the why in that moment, by asking to repeat that action.
I think it would be really valuable if we sort of pursued that kind of approach.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot. I think we could come up with, if we sort of made that whole process part of the system, that might be a way that we can do and achieve some of the goals that Rebecca was talking about, that Eric was talking about, and that the book discusses. And then all of the other discussions about what kind of curriculum do we want? What kind of, what are important? I mean, we could have an entire lesson just built around posture using, for example, what Sasha was saying. We're going to explore, today's lesson is about posture. We're going to try these things. You're going to screw it up. And we want you to explore, how does it feel when you get it right, as opposed to when it doesn't work for you. But that comes, I think, in my opinion, after we've sort of made this whole process that Sasha's talking about and that Kaja's talking about part of how we teach and the environment that we create for our classes. So that's what I was trying to get at. And thank you for letting me have another shot at it.
I think that concept's great, but I also think that it can be going down that alternate route sometimes. Depends on how big the class is and how many people are involved and where you're at in a class. But I think saying to people, because we always have free fencing at the end of our practice, I often say to people when I see them stuck at a spot, remember where you are, try to remember that stimulus, do it a couple more times that way. And when you're done, explore that further, call somebody over who might be able to help you through that, because you're starting to ask questions and that's a good thing. But right now, if you've got 20 other people in the class, letting 2 people, that would take a teacher's attention if there's only 1 teacher. And that's where we run into, there's only 1 or 2 teachers and you got a large group. It's really hard to then do that, but then say, bring that up later. But I think allowing people to ask those questions and explore on their own is a very good thing, and encouraging them to do that is great.
But if you start from the beginning and you created a classroom, people doing that drill together are asking each other these questions. So they're not getting as many, Zwerhaus in, but they're, Zwerhaus, Zorn, whatever. But they're,
Oh no. Come on, come back. Pause this.
Pursuing like those goals, and just because we won't get it right doesn't mean, like, we need to build that into the developing, not being afraid to mess up in the developing of the eliminating the fear of fear. So, I mean, yeah.
Lost my connection for a minute there.
Yeah, I think it made, I think you said it made Rebecca?
Hmm? Yes, what did I do?
I think it made you the,
when Dan lost connection, Rebecca became host.
it made somebody else the, anyway, I don't think it matters right
I
at
think
this
it's-
point.
it's
We're about
back to
over, I
Dan
think.
now, the host.
I don't know, if something went wrong, I probably did it, because that's
No,
not
you,
like-
no.
No,
whenever-
my internet connection.
Whenever his internet connection faded, I think it made you the admin or whatever,
Yeah.
because you were the first
Oh
one.
dear, that's a bad idea. I don't even have the proper Zoom.
Dan now.
I don't even have the option to see everyone at once. And like, like for the last 5 months, and everyone's like, no, you just click this, you just click this. And like, I literally don't have that many options.
No worries.
Uh,
It might be just wait. Sorry, never mind. We'll talk about that after. Never mind.
I mean, I'm pretty sure I need to, if I want that option, I have to actually like download and install the client, and I don't want to do it because my computer barely works as is. So
Yeah.
Well, cool. So yeah, we've been
It's been about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a good place to wrap this up.
Yeah.
This week.
Yep. Are we gonna do this again next week?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
How did everybody feel about the reading the first chapter in the intro? Because if we wanted to proceed with that, we could just read all of chapter 2 and then talk about chapter 2. Or do we want to focus on something smaller? Because it's very dense in a good way, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So do we want to instead just do policies, reducing cost of failure to identifying problems? So just those first like 2
The
sections of chapter 2?
subsections. Yeah.
Makes more sense.
the next 2 weeks, my appearance is questionable. I will make it if I can, but I can't promise anything. And definitely not the week after next. I definitely will not be around.
Okay, so next week we'll focus on page 25 to 36.
Yes.
Ending at identifying problems, or to 35, whatever.
Are those like sub-chapters or something?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
subchapters.
The first 2 sub-chapters of chapter 2? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have the digital version. It doesn't say pages the same way.
Oh,
Okay, yeah.
yeah. The first 2 subchapters of chapter 2.
All right, cool.
Oh, cool. Yes, I will put a little bookmark.
Sasha, that's a great assessment. It's very dense, but in a good way.
There's just so much going on. Like I read all of this today because of poor scheduling and time management. I woke up this morning only having read the intro.
I read the chapters multiple times the first read through because I'm just like, okay, hang on, I gotta go back.
I think what I ended up really liking about this book was that before I read this book, I had some notions about what I thought good club culture and good coaching would involve, and it wasn't necessarily similar to the experience I was having, so I wasn't sure like if I was just way off base. And I didn't know what I was talking about, so I needed to shut up or what was going on. And then I read this book, and it basically confirmed all of the ideas that I had concerning creating a safe space, realizing everyone's there for a different reason. And a big thing that the book gets into later is training martial arts when you're not neurotypical and the challenges that presents, and how that can be different from a standard, martial arts curricula or background and all of that. So reading this book for me it felt validating. It really did.
Yeah, well, I think it brings up a lot of really great points because I'm nationally certified to coach 3 full contact sports all the way through college. And I still learned a lot in this book about teaching and coaching things to people.
Yeah.
So it is a dense book, and there's some really thick, deep thoughts in there, which were great. I wish I had read it before I stopped coaching 15 years ago. I wish I had it when I was coaching. It would have made me a way better coach.
I want to give this book to every single HEMA instructor I know. And like, I know like a good 50% of them are going to be like, I already know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
but if there's even one instructor that can read it and get something out of it, then I think it's worth it.
It was really cool reading all of these chapters and just like the movie reel in my brain of like all of the various training environments and like the hundreds of different drills and exercises I've done over the course of my HEMA career has been like, and I'm not trying to say this like I've been around forever, but I'm not trying to like flex, but
been around long enough. It's
I think
okay.
you've been around longer than anyone else here. So
it was like really like interesting to be like, oh, well, this was really good from this school where the rest of the environment was absolutely terrible. But like, you know, here's this other thing. And like, I don't think before reading the first chapter, there was any like experiences in Arma as horrific as I had there were like not bad compared to other stuff, but that there was a lot of like good stuff that I learned in that, just with a lot of red flags surrounding it, that when you can take that lesson and recreate that in an environment that is safe and doesn't involve the risk of, you know, getting your hand broken or your face broken or an Albion Lichtenauer shoved through your arm, kind of a environment is really kind of interesting, because a lot of those lessons that I learned by, you know, hurting myself are like, there's a safer way of doing that by just encouraging those mistakes in a safer environment. Was kind of cool. It's a trip. I'm excited. There's so much here. I love this book.
And like whenever I got a sense of like, whenever I first got a sense of like the how much was going to be in the book, I was like that's why I was like we really need to discuss this instead of like just read it individually. I think there's a lot more to gain. Like just having these discussions on books that are really dense are really, I think, an important
for
thing,
sure.
because we can have like we can all have a lot of these thoughts, but hearing somebody else talk about them and hearing their slightly different perspective, and then like just having people like it's great to have that. Oh.
Well, and I don't know if any of you have ever hung out with him, but should you ever run across Chris Butner at a tournament or whatever, he and I have done a lot of experimentation based on this book with our sword play with our sabers. And he and I applied a lot of these concepts into our training with the sabers. And now a lot of guys that used to kick our rear ends at saber in our group are now like, oh, you guys aren't easy anymore. No, because we took keep doing that thing you're failing at, keep doing this thing against me that I'm failing at because I need to figure it out. And then after, 20 times, you still haven't figured it out. Okay, what do you see that I'm doing wrong? But testing some of this stuff out, and he's now teaching some more stuff. And it's really going well for a lot of those students because he's applying what we were doing together to the class that he's now teaching. And it's really nice to see it work out well. So I will say some of this, like, let people fail, let them try to figure it out. And won't let them ask the question about why they're failing, let them try to figure it out. And then when they do get success, you can see such a big smile and confidence grow in somebody's face when we've all had that. It's that aha moment of like, God, I've never been able to do the thing. And now I finally did. Well, if somebody's there more being a good coach helping you through to that point, that's such a wonderful feeling. So if you get a chance to work with them on anything, do that with that big furry guy.
Oh, I love Christian.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that's cool about, like, the way, like, it's interesting too, looking at two different ways people learn, like verbal and nonverbal people. Because, like, I can really ring with what Tybee was saying about wanting to talk about why the thing doesn't work. And I've had that happen really well. So, like, failure is interesting too in that respect. Like, when does failure happen? When does the feeling of failure happen? Is an interesting conversation too. Because if I can try it, have it not work, talk about it, try it again, have it not work, talk about it, try it again, have it not work, I don't feel like I failed. I feel like I'm in the process of doing science. Where if I have to, like, do the thing and then just keep doing it without talking about it, I feel like I'm not actively sciencing it properly. So it feels like I'm failing over and over again, as opposed to the sciencing it where I'm talking through what went wrong. But it's interesting because other people are the opposite. Talking for them feels like a stop, which could feel like failure. So a lot of classes are taught, just keep doing the thing, you'll figure it out internally. And I'm usually the one, like Tybee, who wants to talk about why the thing didn't work. And oftentimes I'm told to stop doing that because talking is bad, we're here to train. And it's interesting because it is another balancing element. Like how
Yeah.
much talking versus training. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's definitely can be times where like talking can almost become too much. Like people start getting distracted too much too. I mean, there's always a balance. There's always going to be a balance in between, and it's just going to be something we have to figure out as we go. There's, yeah,
Sorry
we just
if I-
have to keep on asking ourselves these questions on, are we doing like re-examining on ourselves? If we're not constantly re-examining ourselves, we're going to fall into these pitfalls of
Yeah.
complacency and not doing things that are actually beneficial.
Thank you guys for dealing with my incessant stories.
We love you, Shanti. Yeah. So yeah, this feels like kind of a good place to wrap it up for today. Everybody agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
I also went ahead and posted in the book club channel in the Discord the sort of quote unquote assignment for next week. So I figure we'll touch base sometime later during the days ending in Y coming up and find a time that works for everybody who can make it to do this next week too.
Yeah. I think I can make a group I can make a Facebook group that's like a little offshoot of the Liberty Sword Club page. So I think I'll make like an LSC book club
Yeah.
Okay.
Facebook group that we can also work with. I just want to also keep the Discord thing going because not everybody's on Facebook.
I think we also want to have like, oh, you mean like a chat group or like a
just a Facebook group where we can use.
Because I think
as
we
a
should
bulletin.
still keep on, since the Liberty Sword Club still has like a bigger presence or more people still follow that. I think still posting the events in there.
Oh yeah.
Would be good,
just
for sure.
Right, just people who are participating have this like little group for
making
accessing
sure.
those posts as well. Yeah. No, absolutely.
You said there's a space on Discord.
Yes.
Is that how we should be looking for stuff like this? I happened on it by accident, so.
Oh yeah, no, we're I am going to be keeping. We are going to be continually putting this stuff up on Facebook. Just like not everybody in the club is on Facebook.
Okay.
So I'm also putting that into our Discord.
So, but you'll still meet in this manner. You won't have to use Discord to meet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. All right. I mean, I have a Discord account too, but I'm like, okay, what do I need to do to participate?
Yeah. No, it's I just.
All right.
The club just bought this the Zoom membership, so I think we're going to be doing things over here.
Nice.
All right, I'm gonna take off, but it was lovely seeing everyone.
Yeah. Thanks for
great.
letting me
Yeah,
in.
It was
brother.
lovely seeing you.
It was lovely seeing
See you all
everybody.
next time.
I gotta
Bye-bye.
go eat. I'm starving to death.
Okay.
Okay.
I gotta go to
Don't
sleep.
starve to death.
It's past my
I was
bedtime.
like, I
Real
slept up
quick-
for a long time. I'm like, I scream.
Sasha?
Real quick before everybody leaves, I just
Sure.
popped a link to the Discord in the chat for those that don't have it. So you can join and you can see any announcements or questions and get a hold of everybody that's on the Discord. I know I am always on Discord and I can get a hold of anybody because I'm really annoying.
All right, Tybee, go eat. I need to go to bed. It's past my bedtime.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night,
Thanks, you
everybody.
too.
Good to see
Everybody,
y'all.
this has been great, and I want to do all of this. All right. Good night.
Yes. Night. Bye.
Good night.